Why did this report upset you?
Well, we just saw a story on MSNBC that demonstrates how misleading and dishonest and biased they are. They have this pundit come on to explain the delegate count, and I'm going to explain to you why it's not accurate.
Left on the Democratic side. For Sanders to be able to make that argument, these are all the states left. The number there's the number of delegates, allocated delegates that are up for grabs. He needs to erase 210. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but it really is because the way they give out these delegates is proportional.
None of these states are winner take all. Nobody can win 475 delegates
Right.
right now.
Couple pieces of bad news. First of all, he's done so much better in caucuses than in primaries. Only 2 states left have caucuses. They're small states, Wyoming, North Dakota. The rest of these are primaries. That's helped her generally. Also, a lot of these primaries, closed primaries. That's a further hurdle for him. You can't have independents, Republicans voting. When that's been the case, Sanders has done better. But look, the way to look at it is this. 210 is the number. He needs to erase 210. There's a couple states here. California, then in the mid-Atlantic, New York, which is next, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. You add these states together, this is 2/3 of what's left on the Democratic side, just in the mid-Atlantic.
Okay, so far that's correct.
So you follow me for a second here. If you take every other state, forget those big ones, you take every other state, and you just give Sanders huge wins in these states. He doesn't lose any of them.
Wins them all by double digits. Landslides.
Worst case, he gets a draw in the District of Columbia, because it's hard to see him doing any better than that. But otherwise, we're talking big wins. He's going to race 125 of that 210. He would still need to make up 85 at that point. Again, being really optimistic. Here's the problem. Take New York, for instance. That's the next one up. He's trailing in the polls right now. He's made up some ground. He's still down double digits. Demographically, not the best fit for him. Let's say he has a great 2 weeks. He wins New York. It's 52-48 Sanders, 53-47. He wins it by a couple points. Huge upset if he does that, by the way. 247 delegates. How would those break down? It'd probably be something like 130 for Sanders and 117 for Hillary Clinton in the absolute best case scenario. So huge state, huge upset, huge win for Sanders. All he does is take 13 off of that. You go down, you look at some of these other states.
Okay, let's stop right there. So he says if he gets this win, which he's calling a huge win, best case scenario, which who is he to say what the best case scenario is, he would gain 13 delegates that would knock off the 85. So that would bring us to 72 delegates difference. Remember that number. It would bring us down to 72 delegates.
Pennsylvania. He's trailing huge in the polls right now. He gets a monumental comeback. He wins a closed primary in a big, diverse state. What does he get for that? He might make up 11 delegates on a great night for him. You look at Maryland, demographically, very large African-American population there. Closed primary. This looks like a disaster in the making, potentially, for Bernie Sanders. That's the other risk here. If he loses any of these states, let's say he loses Maryland. Let's say he keeps it close, but loses it. It's a 55-40 split in the delegates. He's losing 15 delegates. So you got to, that 125, that target goes up to 140.
What? Okay, he just said, let's say he loses Maryland and he wipes out the 13. The number was down to 72. So he loses the 13, it would go back to 85. How does it go back to 140? If he was to lose Maryland, he wipes out the 13 and he brings it back to 140. He wipes out the 125. How'd that happen?
40 just by losing Maryland. So
just by losing Maryland.
Sanders, mathematically, it can happen. You have to believe in momentum, though,
Wow.
for it to happen. This idea.
And now he just starts talking. You have to believe in momentum. It could happen, but 140 is very steep. But what happened to California? 475 delegates. Why did he say at the beginning of this conversation, forget the big states? He puts an X through it. Forget about that. Let's talk about this over here. What about California? 475 delegates. If Bernie Sanders wins, let's say 60-40, which given his performance over the last several weeks is not that improbable. Very liberal state. Susan Sarandon is there. Rah-rah. If he wins this 60-40, he gets 20% of the delegates. What's 20% of 475? 94 delegates in that one state alone. Why did he say forget about the big states and put an X through it?
This idea that the demographic hurdles he faces, they're going to disappear in the face of this abstract thing called momentum. That's what you have to believe.
And this is all toward him still not having the number of delegates you need in order to clinch the nomination, but simply having a lead so he can make a case to the superdelegates that they ought to support him as the pledged delegate leader, even though he hasn't clinched.
If he erases 210,
Yeah.
he can start the
He
conversation.
can start the conversation, even though all of the superdelegates right now are very heavily toward Clinton. Wow, that's a steep path.
That's a steep path. Yeah, when you cut California off and you push it off into the ocean. Yeah, it's a steep path. His math was wrong here, and he completely leaves out California. And this is their expert.